All right, everybody. What is up? Sysab and Sean here. And today we are going to start the Linux Upskill Challenge series. Essentially, there's a lot of folks out there that are maybe trying to get into Linux a little bit more or understand some more of the commands that they maybe don't know. And I found this website a while ago through Reddit. There's a subreddit dedicated to this, and it's called the Linux Upskill Challenge. And it's a very hands-on, practical skills set of classes. Now, there's only 21 days of classes. Yeah, 21 is like what to do after you've learned all this. And I think that's really cool. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to make a video series about all these, and they should be pretty short. These aren't really super in-depth lessons. So I'm going to try to record as many as possible, and then I'll release them maybe once every other day or once a day. I don't want to release them all each day because that might be too much content at once. So I'll probably trickle them out a little bit so you don't feel bombarded with subscription notifications from me. But for the time being, we're going to get them recorded, get information out there, and things like that. Now, I do want to highlight some stuff about this. So this may just be the day one lesson will be longest. The main how this works and homepage gives you information on how to get started, how to do the homework, follow along with all the different days. Here's a table of contents about each day and kind of what you'll be doing. And of course, the link will be in the description below. They have a Reddit, they have a Discord, they have their own YouTube channel. So we'll go ahead and link to that too. LinkedIn page for the person that currently maintains, a GitHub for the whole thing here, and even a Mastodon. So highly recommend everyone check this out. I'm just going to show it off from my point of view as a person that's used Linux for a while. I might talk about other commands that I use more frequently than the ones they mention here to accomplish the same goal, because sometimes there is that. And one thing that I'm going to do differently is the class is based off Ubuntu, which is cool. It's fine. I don't use Ubuntu at work. A lot of places use something similar to Red Hat Linux, Rocky, Alma, those kind of things. Ubuntu server is a thing and people do use it, but with the environments I've worked in, it's been mostly Red Hat style stuff. So I'm going to show you the commands in Ubuntu. And if for any reason there is a difference command in RHEL specifically, I'll show that one off as well. So let's get started with the first day zero, which I'm already well past. I have my own servers, as we all know. This is a great introduction on where to go to get a Linux Upskill Challenge server for free so that you can access things. This is a Debian 11 server without a challenge. It's for you to do as you please. Please be mindful that there's still some limitations. There's no outgoing internet access, etc., etc. And then there are other systems. One thing I would really like to be able to do is also offer systems for people. I'm still working on how I can do that safely and carefully because I host through home, but it would be a cool data center experience for me to do. But there are some other options. You can run a local server, which is what I'm doing. You can go to places like Digital Cloud or Linode and Google Cloud, AWS, Azure. I believe Oracle has a free tier that you could probably use for this if you feel comfortable using Oracle. I personally don't, but that's your decision. I have my own issues with Oracle, so do what you need to do. So let's start with day one, and I will pull up my terminal, and we'll go from there. I will follow along in the text. So day one is getting to know your server. There's an introduction talking about Ubuntu Server LTS, and going over that. I highly recommend you read it. So your tasks today are to connect and log into your server, preferably using an SSH client. Run a few simple commands to check the status of your server. So SSH client, it goes into kind of some stuff you can do. I'm using Windows Terminal right now. So this is, really simple. I'm already SSH'd in, but I'll go ahead and I'll back out just so you can see there. And we'll SSH in. We'll pop in the password and we're in. Now, nothing about that's different for RHEL. I've talked on the channel before about stuff such as MOBA Xterm. Terminus is a new one that's out there. If you want to use a different tool than just Windows Terminal from like Windows 11 or whatnot to SSH in. You can download stuff like PuTTY. And if you're using Mac, there's information here on how to do that. But essentially, the first thing they have you do is that exact command. So we'll go through it again real quick just so you can see. You're just going to SSH to your server, and you should know your IP address of your server. SSH, username that was set up, which I set up for myself. 192.168.30.13. It's an internal IP address, so I don't mind showing it off. And there we go. We are in. And that's it. That was that's most of lesson 1. Now they also discuss doing things such as utilizing SSH keys. So if you're in AWS or Azure, then there's instructions on how to do SSH keys, which is actually pretty nice to do. And we can do that in Windows too. So let's go over those steps. So in Windows, recent Windows 10 versions, the same command line client is now available, but must be enabled, which I have enabled through Windows 11. But again, PuTTY, Stellar PuTTY, MobaXterm, Terminus, they list a ton of these, links for all of them. You could also install Windows Subsystem for Linux and then do things like that. But that's kind of advanced for this. Day 1 is literally log into the server and get some information about your server. So let's finish getting information about our server and finish up day 1. So the first thing they want you to type once you're in the console, this is all command line, by the way, which I really approve of. Let's do lsb release -a. So that's giving us information about our OS. Distributor IP, Ubuntu, description 24041 LTS, codename Noble. Pretty neat little information there. In rel, I don't think this command works. We're going to test it real quick. So I'm going to copy it. We're going to switch to the rel box. Make sure this is showing up right. Yep. Let's see if this works. Yeah, see that command's not found in Red Hat. So that's going to throw you for an error. So the one that I would do is pretty lazy. There's a file you can read. Cat is a read command called Red Hat release. And it'll tell you what version of whatever operating system you're running. Now this says Rocky Linux 9.5, but most of the time everyone puts Red Hat release as their file to flag for their OS. So if the only one I know that's different is Oracle, and I believe the command is etc Oracle release, but they might also have a Red Hat release file. But anyway, that's like the first command I've noticed so far that isn't really the same. So let's see what else they want us to learn. Yeah, they also have cat/etc OS release. That is probably for Ubuntu. Let's see here. And there you go. Tons more information there. But I don't believe this command works in rel. Oh, it does. Look at that. So now we found a unified command that works between both of them. I didn't even know that. And then the third command they discuss is uname-a. I've used this a lot. This gives you like your system name, the kernel version you're running, and then a bunch of information about the system plus the date. This command does work in rel, so uname-a works fine. Print system information and show things about kernel version, hardware platform, etc. Uptime is a command to show you how long your system's been up. So 118 days for this one. That works in rel as well. 59 days for this system. And then who am I will print information about you. Pretty basic. You can also do, and kind of skip it ahead, who, and you can see who all's logged in. As long as you have permission. Okay. So that was general information about the server. So let's get some information about hardware. LSCPU will give you information about your processor. As you can see, this is a VM, so you're getting VM information. Not a whole lot of useful stuff right now, but LSCPU is kind of important when you're like, oh, what processor am I running again? Okay, it's an Intel. Cool, got it. LSBLK, this is going to list block devices. Block devices are disks, partitions, LVMs, anything that uses storage will show up as a block device. LSPCI for PCI devices. So as you can see, there's all of this different stuff from Intel in here, VGA compatible controller, QEMU PCI bridge, Red Hat, VirtIO, SCSI storage controller. Here's our network adapter, and it gives these ID numbers. These ID numbers are actually pretty important to know if you're ever trying to troubleshoot. Sometimes your logs will only give you an ID number, and you'll need to go through your PCI devices to find that. But again, that's way down the line. And then let's do USB devices. I don't think I'll have any, but we'll check. Well, I do. Look at that. The Linux Foundation 1.1 root hub and the QEMU tablet. Now, as far as I know, all of these same commands also work in Red Hat. So ls CPU, yep. ls blk, yep. ls PCI, yep. And ls USB, yep. And most of it, same exact stuff, because these are both virtual machines that I host. Most of the Linux devices are actually the same between both things, so there's not a lot of difference here. The next thing is measure memory and CPU usage. Don't worry, Linux won't eat your RAM, but if you want to check the amount of memory used in the system, use free-h. Free-h. So there you go. That's human readable. Pretty nice. You can also do, the command I learned back when I was younger was free-m to get megabytes and free-g to get gigabytes, which isn't really a good idea here because these are so small. Let's use free-h to get more human readable. And there you go. We can see that we have a total of 8 gigs of RAM. We're using 671. There are 4.7 free. There's stuff in the buffer cache. And then we have 3.8 gigs of swap. And all of that's free right now because we're not really doing anything. And then they said vmstat. So let's see what vmstat's got in there. Vmstat's another way to look at it. I don't find this very pretty, personally, but it is available to you as a way to look at your memory. And then another thing to do is HTOP. This is a color-based process manager. Think task manager in Windows, if you're familiar with that, but for Linux. This one, I believe HTOP comes by default in Ubuntu. I'm not sure if it's on Rocky by default. Yeah, you'd have to install it. So you just do sudo dnf install HTOP. Rocky comes with just top by default, which is just not as pretty, basically. It's black and white. So there's top, boring. We hit Control C, HTOP, and now we have matching. That's pretty cool. I love HTOP. This is a great way to look at your processes that are running. So there's Docker containers going on in here. Python's doing something. I've got some just snaps running, container stuff, worker processes for Nginx, a bunch of stuff that I really don't need in here, but it's all running on there. So that's cool. That's a way to look at your processes, which will tell you kind of what's eating your CPU, what's consuming your RAM, things like that. Now, if you want to use disk space, df-h, this is your kind of global view of your storage. So as you can see here, we've got some temporary file system. We've got dev mapper ubuntu vg ubuntu lv. I realize that's a really long thing to list out, but that is going to be your main partition, essentially. As you can see, that's mounted on slash. Slash holds everything. We've got dev sda2, which is a 2 gig partition for booting the system. And then some more tempfs for different little things running in user spaces and things like that. So an example of this to make it make a little bit more sense is if I type cd slash right now, then you can see here that I'm in the slash area. If I do ls-la, you're going to see all these different live files, folders, mostly folders. These are called symbolic links. Basically, there were a folder, but now they go to a different location so that software that's used to the old location still works fine. Things like that. But this is the main system. Now, you'll also see this boot directory. And you'll remember here, that's technically a different device. But in Linux, it all looks like it's the main runway, the main drive, everything like that. A lot of places, when you're doing servers, this will be a separate partition so that users can't fill up their home directory and crash the system. And then another location is var log. Will usually get placed on another partition because log files can build up pretty quickly. And if that happens, it would be bad. So how do you check and see? Let's say the hard drive is full, right? It's not, but let's say you wanted to check. you can use du-h. So let's go c/. here. This is going to probably throw some errors and just list a ton of files. This isn't super handy if you do it at this high level. But let's say we go into /home. We won't be able to see the other person's, but we can see what's in our home directory. As you can see, permission denied for /mosaic, but in here we can see that htop config is taking up 8K, .config for my user account is taking up 12K, 4K for .cache, 36K for just the folder of /tigermask. And let's do var. Now, if we do du-h here, it's going to drill down through all those directories, and then it's going to give me a total at the end here of how much space is in there. But maybe I don't want to drill down to all those. Maybe I just want to do var log. You can do du-h max depth equals 1. I do believe this is correct. And that is going to throw some stuff that we can't read because we didn't run it as sudo. We'll get into that other time, but you can see it's stopping at this kind of top level here. So the backups folder has 2 megs in total. The opt folder has 4K. The library folder has 2.3K. And this is all in /var, remember. So if /var /log was full, which does Ubuntu even have /log? Yeah, it does. So that folder just didn't have hardly anything in it because it didn't even get listed, or we just don't have access to it. Yeah, here we go. 595 megs for log. This is usually where your stuff will end up. Sometimes it's in here. As you can see, these are already pretty large folders, even though this machine does not do all that much. But if you ever need to see how much space something is using, du-h max depth 1 will let you drill down and make a little bit more sense, able to read things. And of course, doing it with sudo perms, which I believe you'll be able to have in this, will give you a nice clean listing of every subfolder under var that is consuming 4.4 gigs in total, split up between those different folders. Nice and simple, great way to measure your disk space without having to use any sort of GUI. And looks like, yeah, lastly is measure your network usage. So let's do ifconfig as the first command they reference. This is going to show your network adapters. You can see since I have Docker running, that's on here, but our main adapter is this one. Our ENS18 shows our IP address, our net mask, our broadcast address. We won't get into the networking piece, but here's our IP6 address. Here's our MAC address. Here's our RX packets, RX bytes, TX packets, TX bytes, any errors, dropped packets, etc. will all be there. LO is our loopback address. So if you ever need to connect yourself, 127.0.0.1, that's your loopback. And then this is for Pterodactyl, which is a game serving, blah, 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 doesn't matter. But that's basic information about your network adapter right there. But let's see, what if we want to see some information about what's going on with our network adapter? We can use the netstat command. Netstat-i is showing the MTU configuration for our adapters, which again, we'll get into for more of a networking course. We have our main adapter here. As you can see, it's doing the majority of the work like it's supposed to be. Loopback is obviously sending some traffic around to itself, and that's really about it. Netstat-a is actually pretty cool. I don't know if that works in Red Hat. Let's see. Or -i, sorry. It does. So as you can see, I've got multiple interfaces here because if you remember from other videos, this is a HPC head node. We're just going to use that as an example here. Some real life example systems. Kind of a neat way to do it. So that's cool. And ifstat is apparently a constant update. But it doesn't look like it constantly updates here. They reference it as though it's going to keep running. I don't even have it installed. Interesting. If you want more info on traffic, sudo iftop-i and then your network adapter. I don't have iftop, so let's get it real quick. Sudo apt install iftop. I'm guessing this is going to be a lot like htop, but for networking. Yeah, and as you can see, we're actually seeing network traffic as it happens, which is really cool. We'll go ahead and close that. And then That's really it for the basics. So let's go back through it one more time as a quick overview of what we covered. So the first thing was getting your server. Check. We can do that. The next thing was being able to SSH into your server. We can do that. We verified how to run the SSH command, the username and password that was set for your system. That's what you need to be able to get into. Let's clear that so it's a little bit cleaner. That's covering the things. We have a command prompt. We know that the $sign is a command prompt. This is your username, obviously. This is the system you're on. This is the folder you're in. Tilde is just your home folder. So anytime you see tilde up there, that means you're in your home folder. If I go to var log, it's going to show var log as the folder we're in. So on and so forth. And if you ever want to go back home, cd tilde. If you're ever in a directory and you want to go up a level, I think this is coming up in the next one, cd space ... that takes you out. Basic navigation is day 2. So we will move past that. Hardware information. We learned ls CPU to ccpu information. ls blk for block information. ls PCI for PCI devices. ls USB for USB devices. You're probably wondering, why ls? Well, that's the list command. ls-la. List, blah, 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 blah. And that gives you essentially like the dir command. If you were an old school Linux person, we use dir, ls-la, ls-lha, so you can add human readable. But anyway, that's your hardware stuff. Memory, free-h, human readable memory, also htop for a nice color-based process. As you can see, these are my 4 CPU cores, the RAM, the swap, the PID. This is the process number or process ID. So if I wanted to kill a process and I didn't know its name or I didn't know how it got started, you can literally reference this number to kill it. And we'll probably go over that. There we go. df-h, so you can see your partitions. Again, this is the physical device. I don't want to really call it that, but that's pretty much what this is. This is the physical device. This is how it's mounted. So it's like you have an SSD, and when you put it in the system, Windows will format it NTFS and make a volume, and you'll see that volume as a little disk. But really, there's 2 layers to it. There's the disk, and then there's the partition. So this is the disk. Again, this is a very simplistic version. This is its mount point, because really, these all become partitions, usually on much larger drives. We'll get into that when we get to that day. And then we have vmstat, which I didn't care for. Not very pretty. du-h to see folder information, like we discussed. Don't forget --max -depth equals 1 to just see 1 layer deep if you want to. Of course, you can change the number. And then ifconfig to see networking information or IP address, which I don't really use that. You can do IPA, same thing if you want to do it shorter. I like ifconfig. That's old school. That's what I'm used to. netstat-i, so we can see, got to type it right. netstat-i to see network traffic, or iftop. Where'd it go? Sudo iftop -i ENS18 for our network adapter. And you got to give your password when you run a sudo command, and it's listening, and there it goes. We can see traffic again. As you can see, it's doing the same stuff it was doing before. Because a lot of times network traffic is just the same stuff over and over and over. And then a Control-C to get out of that. Anytime you need to break out of a window, Control-C is probably the best way to do that. So they mention an extension to this class. If this was all too easy, check it out down below. What is swap? What is swap space? How Linux deals with out of memory, and how do I find out Linux CPU utilization and usage? So those are homework lessons for kind of the day 1 course. And that's going to be about it. I'm actually kind of surprised at how long that took to get through the day 1 stuff, but now you have a system, or at least you should have a system by now. You should be able to SSH into it, and you should be able to use those basic commands to kind of learn about the system you're on. And those should be available to you to use or something similar. Make sure that you focus, if you're using a distro different from Ubuntu or RHEL, make sure you find out what the compatible commands are. But most of the time, those are all kind of the same place. But that's about it for this one, and we will see you in the next day.